questions, the honourable member for Chilliwack Hope.
Madam Speaker, for weeks the Finance Minister has been telling Canadians that he's revealed all of his financial assets to the Ethics Commissioner. For weeks he's been telling Canadians that he's followed the advice of the Ethics Commissioner on avoiding conflicts of interest. But yesterday, Canadians learned that the Ethics Commissioner has concerns about the Finance Minister's conduct related to Bill C-27. If the Ethics Commissioner has concerns, that means the minister either failed to disclose all of his assets to her or has ignored her advice on avoiding conflicts of interest. Which is it?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
I think it's important to remember that the Finance Minister has always worked with the Ethics Commissioner and has followed all of her recommendations and will always do. Yesterday he's met with the Ethics Commissioner to continue on that path of transparency and to always being forthcoming with the Ethics Commissioner. He's announced he'd go even further than what the Ethics Commissioner has initially recommended, divesting all his shares in Morneau Shepell, making sure that all his assets are put in a blind trust, and donating all profits generated or all the increase in value of those shares since the day he was elected until today, and he's working with the Ethics Commissioner on that front. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Chilliwack Hope.
Well, the Ethics Commissioner has serious concerns with the Finance Minister's conduct. She's already convicted him of breaking the rules for trying to hide his French villa, and now she's considering launching a new investigation into his actions on pension reform legislation. The minister can no longer hide behind the Ethics Commissioner and keep using her as a human shield. She has concerns with his conduct. So I ask again, what assets has the minister been hiding from the Ethics Commissioner, or what advice on avoiding conflicts of interest has he been ignoring?
The honourable member for the honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Minister of Finance.
Short answer is none. He's always followed all advices of the Ethics Commissioner, and that advice at the time was to put in place a conflicts of interest wall, which was, according to the Ethics Commissioner, the best measure of compliance possible, which was a measure good enough for the member from Milton, good enough for Denis Lebel when he was minister. That was the advice of the Ethics Commissioner, which the minister has followed. He's going even further to keep working for the Canadian economy, for the Canadian people. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Chilliwack Hope.
Mr. Speaker, how can these Liberals expect Canadians to believe anything the Finance Minister says? He said he placed his assets in a blind trust. He did not. He said he disclosed all of his assets to the Ethics Commissioner. He did not. He said he was following the advice of the Ethics Commissioner to avoid conflicts of interest, but clearly he did not, because she still has significant concerns about his conduct. The minister can't buy his way out of this mess he's created, so when will he stop defending the indefensible and just admit he's in a blatant personal conflict of interest?
The honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Finance Minister has always followed the recommendation of the Ethics Commissioner, setting up a conflict of interest wall, which is what she recommended as the best measure of compliance, which was a measure good enough for the member from Milton, for Denis Lebel back when they were in power. And Madam Speaker, I can understand why they want to forget their past, why they have that selective amnesia, because when you look at their record, they failed to grow the economy, they failed to reduce inequalities, they failed on all factors, on all economic indicators. We're doing a lot better for Canadians. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Richmond, Athabasca. Madam Speaker, the Ethics Commissioner still hasn't even finished her investigation of the Prime Minister's Christmas vacation paid for by taxpayers. And now we're learning that she is also investigating the Minister of Finance. We know that the minister, via Morneau Shepell, is benefiting from his and his department's political decisions. Will he finally admit that he never disclosed his conflict of interest during the Bill C-27 discussions? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Minister of Finance has always worked with the Ethics Commissioner, followed her recommendations, continues to do so, and always has done so transparently. That is what all parliamentarians have to do with her. Our situations are assessed, she gives recommendations, and he followed those recommendations and even went above and beyond by divesting his shares and giving the difference in value of those shares to charity. Madam Speaker? Order, please. I just want to remind everyone that when someone has the floor, they have to be respected and listened to. Perhaps you don't like the answer, but you have to listen. The Honourable Member for Richmond, Athabasca. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The facts are facts. The Minister of Finance confirmed during his press conference on the 16th of October that he had been naive about his shares in Morneau Shepell. We now know that the Minister has interests in Bombardier, the Bank of Canada, the Canada Revenue Agency, the Senate, CATSA, and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency that totals more than $14 million in contracts. Does the Minister of Finance think that he was also being naive when he admitted fault and thought that a simple donation with a tax credit, by the way, would conceal his conflict of interest? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance has always has been fully compliant with the rules that govern us, but I understand why they want to focus on the personal situation of the Minister of Finance rather than talk about his record. Because if you compare his record to their record, and you look at the economic indicators, they failed, and we have the strongest growth rate in the G7. We've reduced poverty by 40% amongst children. We have helped more than 900,000 seniors with the GIS. Madam Speaker, we are reducing inequality and increasing economic growth for all, something they never did.
North Island, Powell River.
The Finance Minister tried to pass off multiple ethics violations as a distraction. Well, the Ethics Commissioner says she has serious concerns with his bill that would benefit Morneau Shepell. But just before we found this out, the Minister suddenly decided to donate millions of dollars to charity. When you give money under duress, that's not charity, Mr. Speaker. That's self-preservation. Will the Minister finally admit that he failed to live up to the basic ethical standards, and will he apologize to Canadians?
Hear, hear. Honourable Secretary Parliament.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Finance Minister has lived up to the Ethics Commissioner's expectations. He's followed her recommendations. He's worked with her from the very beginning and will continue to do so on all matters that fall in her portfolio. So, Madam Speaker, I think when you look at the Finance Minister, who's a man who's dedicated the last 2 years of his life to public service with great results for Canadians, I can tell you, Madam Speaker, I'm very proud, and he's achieved great results for all Canadians.
L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Berthier-Maskinongé.
Not out of fear of losing your job. Le geste de charité soudain.
The sudden charitable behaviour on the part of the Minister began just before the NDP received a letter from the Ethics Commissioner expressing concern over the Minister's conduct. And this happened just before he had been fined by the Ethics Commissioner for not having disclosed all his assets. The Minister wants everyone to turn their attention to other matters, but he still refuses to admit that he did something wrong. Will the Liberals join us and work with us to make sure this doesn't happen again? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Madam Speaker, in this House, in this Parliament, the Ethics Commissioner is responsible to preserve the integrity of Parliament. We all respect the Ethics Commissioner. The Minister of Finance has always worked with her, will continue to work with her, to comply with her recommendations and to make sure that he is fully compliant with the rules governing us. And he announced that he would go even further by divesting his shares in Morneau Shepell and putting his assets in a blind trust. Madam Speaker, that's what acting transparently is, and that's what the Minister of Finance and this government is doing. The Honourable Member for Berthier-Maskinongé. Madam Speaker, on the 3rd of October, the Quebec Minister of Culture sent a letter to the Federal Minister of Heritage. In that letter, he condemned the fact that the agreement did not uphold tax and regulatory fairness for all businesses. He also criticized the lack of any guarantee of Francophone content. Contrary to the federal government, the government of Quebec seems to have the courage to deal with these kinds of problems. But in order to do so, he needs the agreement, and the Minister of Canadian Heritage refuses to give it to him. Why are the Liberals refusing to make public an agreement that they are so proud of? Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Canadian Heritage. Madam Speaker, we heard the opinions of Quebecers and opinions in the rest of Canada. We heard more than 30,000 people during our consultations. They were clear. They want a government that supports Canadian culture. We heard this and we acted. We invested $2.2 million in arts and culture, the highest in the G7 and the highest in 30 years in Canada. This is investment in our creators, in production, and in Canadian content.
North Island, Powell River.
Madam Speaker, the Heritage Minister keeps claiming she listened to cultural experts and the industry, but Netflix seems to have gotten special attention. Not only did they lobby her office multiple times, but they also don't have to pay their fair share for doing business in Canada. Now, Madam Speaker, there is a very easy way for the Minister to clear up the confusion around the sweetheart deal she signed with Netflix. Just show us the deal. Will the Heritage Minister table the deal she signed with Netflix in this place?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to Canadian Heritage, the Minister of Canadian.
Madam Speaker, we've heard the concerns of Quebec and the concerns of the rest of Canada. In the context of our consultations on DigiCanCon, we heard from 30,000 people around this country. What they said to us was very, very clear. They want a government which finally believes in and supports arts and Canadian culture. We have heard and we have acted, Madam Speaker. We've invested $2.2 billion in arts and culture, the largest amount in the G7, the largest amount in this country in 30 years. This will help our creators. It will help ensuring Canadian stories are told in Canada and abroad.
L'honorable député de Louis Saint-Laurent.
Well, member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, yesterday the Minister of Finance, in his statements, confirmed two things. First, that he was in a conflict of interest that benefited him and his family and had been so for 2 years. And second, that in acting that way, he only would act when he was caught red-handed. Madam Speaker, this doesn't put an end to this issue. The reality is that the Minister of Finance still has numbered companies, and if he really wants to be honest with all Canadians, when will he declare all his assets in his numbered companies? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Minister of Finance has always acted with only one interest in mind, the interest of Canadians. Madam Speaker, over the past 2 years, we have stimulated growth to the highest level in years. We have reduced poverty of the children by 40%. This is one of the most ambitious social policies in the country in our history. I think we should be proud of that, and I understand why they wouldn't want to talk about the decade of darkness when they were in power.
L'honorable député de Louis Saint-Laurent.
The honourable member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Madam Speaker, the member seems to have forgotten that thanks to their economic policy, the wealthiest of Canadians pay $1 billion less in taxes since they've come into power, contrary to what we did and contrary to what they're saying. Now, I'm going to put the question again to the member. I just want to tell him that it's the Minister of Finance and the Department of Finance that is at issue here. Why doesn't the Minister of Finance not declare all his assets in numbered companies so that Canadians can finally see for themselves? A reminder that questions have to be addressed through the Speaker and not to the member. Madam Speaker, what the Minister of Finance has always done is work with the Ethics Commissioner and be transparent in order to ensure that she can give us recommendations, give recommendations to all of us. And the Minister of Finance, set up a conflict of interest wall. That was one of her recommendations. That's something that Denis Lebel that the member for Milton did. It was good enough for them. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance has acted with integrity, and last week he went even above and beyond that.
Norfolk.
Well, Madam Speaker, it's essential that Canadians have confidence in their government and believe that what it does is in the best interest of Canadians.
Absolutely.
Canadians should also be able to have confidence that ministers would be honest about their assets and not abuse their office for personal gain. Yet, Madam Speaker, this is exactly what the Minister of Finance has done.
No.
So my question is simple. What other stocks does the minister own in his numbered companies that could benefit from his ministerial actions?
Good question.
L'honorable Secrétaire Parlementaire.
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
As I've mentioned, the Finance Minister has worked with the Ethics Commissioner, is collaborating, has always been proactive with the Ethics Commissioner to not only be in full compliance with the rules that govern us, but also to follow her recommendations, which he has done, and he's going even further, Madam Speaker, divesting himself of all his shares in Morneau Chapelle, donating to charity any difference in value between the time he took office and today, and also putting all his assets in a blind trust so that he can focus on the important work that he's been doing for all Canadians over the last 2 years with remarkable results. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member Haldeman Norfolk.
Well, Madam Speaker, while this government talks about being open and transparent, the Finance Minister has proven that that just isn't true. 2 years ago, he said that he was going to put his assets in a blind trust, but he didn't. He told the Ethics Commissioner that he had disclosed all of his assets, but he didn't. He said that he had a tight ethics screen, but he didn't. So how can Canadians just trust him not to own stocks through his numbered companies, stocks that he could blindly help, like he helped Morneau Chappelle.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, the Finance Minister, as I've mentioned, has always worked with the Ethics Commissioner very proactively in a forthcoming and transparent manner. He will continue to do so. That's what he's always done. But now he'll also focus on what he's done for the last 2 years, which is growing this economy, making sure that all Canadians have a fair shot at success, reducing inequalities. Something that never occurred to them would be a good thing. This is what we're doing on this side. Prosperity for all. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Good job.
The Honourable Member for Carlton Trail Eagle Creek.
Well, Madam Speaker, the Ethics Commissioner is investigating the Finance Minister for his involvement in C-27, where he directly benefited from his holdings in Morneau Chappelle. We know that those holdings are in a numbered company in Alberta. We also know he owns several other numbered companies. Will the Finance Minister come clean and tell this House what else he holds in those other numbered companies?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Side, we have the utmost trust in the Ethics Commissioner to provide the right path forward for parliamentarians and to be always forthcoming and transparent with her so that she can guide us in our actions. This is what the Minister has done when he took office from the very beginning. He's worked with the Ethics Commissioner, will continue to do so to make sure that Canadians have the utmost confidence in him as Finance Minister as he grows our economy, as he reduces inequalities in this country. That's what is expected of the Finance Minister. That's what he's doing, and we're proud of it.
The Honourable Member for Carlton Trail Eagle Creek.
Well, Madam Speaker, too little, too late. Any magnanimous gesture by this Minister of Finance is just an attempt to direct from his grave ethical breach. The Prime Minister, who, by the way, is also under investigation by the Ethics Commissioner, is allowing this to be swept under the rug rather than deal with it. This is shocking to Canadians across the country. Can the Finance Minister tell us if he'll claim a tax credit from this grand gesture?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
The Finance Minister, as he proceeds to donate the difference in value of the shares between when he took office and today, will work with the Ethics Commissioner as he goes forward. We'll always work with the Ethics Commissioner as he's moving forward to divest him of all shares in Morneau Chappelle, to place his assets in a blind trust, and then to keep working for the Canadian economy. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Madam Speaker, an independent assessment of the Toronto office of CSIS that was made public showed that staff do not trust senior management to create a safe and harassment-free work environment, free of discrimination. And this is on top of legal procedures that were started by former employees for very serious allegations. Will the minister take the necessary steps to end this culture in CSIS and launch an investigation into this kind of behavior?
Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness.
Madam Speaker, this is an extremely serious matter. The former director of CSIS launched the examination that the honourable member refers to. The findings of that examination are certainly troubling. The current director of CSIS has taken personal charge of this matter and has made it very clear that the behavior being complained of here is absolutely unacceptable. It should not exist in a federal workplace, and the Government of Canada will take the necessary steps to make sure that it stops.
Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly.
Madam Speaker, and certainly I agree with the Minister on the seriousness of the allegations, but the issue here is that there's clearly a cultural problem, and one third-party report is not enough. What we're asking the Minister is to launch a full investigation into this type of discrimination, these allegations of homophobia and Islamophobia. Also investigate to make sure it's not affecting the work that CSIS does with regards to the people that it targets. And more importantly, Madam Speaker, I want to ask the Minister if he will undertake to make sure that the managers responsible for this behavior will be held directly responsible and, if necessary, fired.
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, CSIS, indeed all of the agencies in the public safety portfolio, know very clearly my attitude with respect to these matters. This behavior is unacceptable. When it happens, there must be appropriate consequences that follow. I would simply point out to the honourable gentleman that the legal procedures that are engaged here are at an early stage of evolving. And they need to properly take their course, but they will be followed very, very carefully by me and my officials to determine an appropriate outcome. This kind of behavior is simply...
The honourable member for Caribou Prince George.
Madam Speaker, the people in my riding, they work hard to make ends meet. They pay their fair share of taxes, and they expect their politicians to do exactly the same thing. If it seems unethical that someone shaping public policy should have the ability to directly benefit from that policy, well, it's because it is. The minister owns several other numbered companies that could put him in additional conflicts. Will he finally do the right thing and tell Canadians what's in them?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I've mentioned, the Finance Minister has always worked with the Ethics Commissioner, will continue to do so, to follow all the rules that govern us in this House, and he's going even further than the recommendations she's initially provided to him. Now, if he talks about Canadians having difficulties making ends meet, they were neglected for 10 years in their government. We're doing all we can to support middle-class Canadians, those working hard to join it. Madam Speaker, while they were raising the TFSA limit, to which only 3% of the wealthiest Canadians contribute, we're lowering taxes for 9 million Canadians. We're giving more to 9 out of 10 Canadian families, on average $2,300. That's helping.
Once again, I will remind the opposition that when a member has the floor, that must be respected. The answer must be listened to, whether you like the answer or not.
Prince George.
Madam Speaker, for the first time, we have a finance minister and a prime minister that are under investigation. In what world do we live in that you can just pay yourself out of problems? Oh, right, if you are a billionaire finance minister. Madam Speaker, the conduct of the Minister of Morneau Shepell is appalling. I mean the finance minister. While trying to bilk hardworking small business owners out of their money, he was sitting at the cabinet table agreeing to sponsor a pension bill that would grease his own pockets. The Ethics Commissioner has seen fit to look into his shady actions. Caught red-handed, will he finally come clean with Canadians?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Speaker, I understand they want to keep focusing on the Finance Minister's finances while we focus on Canadians' ability to pay their bills and Canadians' ability to prosper, to be successful, and so that all Canadians, regardless of what their situation is at birth, have a fair shot at success, regardless of the cards they're dealt with at birth, that they can play good hands. That's why we've put in place, and this Finance Minister has put in place, the Canada Child Benefits that's reducing child poverty by 40% in this country. That's why we're helping Canadians from all walks of life. While they keep playing politics, we work for Canadians. Thank you.
The honourable member for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes Brock.
Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance introduced Bill C-27 to amend the Pension Benefits Standards Act. Immediately afterwards, his shares at Morneau Shepell jumped by $2 million. Wow. Now, we all know he forgot about his fancy villa in France, but surely he didn't forget about the company he has 1 million shares in, the company his father founded, that just so happens to be a pension management company. Stocks go up, credibility goes right down. When, with the Ethics Commissioner investigating the minister's actions, can he inform this House what other investigations he's facing?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I know they like alternative facts on the other side of the House. When they talk about the share value in Morneau Shepell, 2 weeks after Bill C-27 was introduced, the share price was down 12% from what it was when C-27 was introduced. So they can keep playing politics, Madam Speaker. We'll keep working for Canadians on this side of the House, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Lévis-Lobinière. Madam Speaker, the member for Louis Saint Laurent again, and colleagues must listen to what's happening in the House and not speak when it is not their turn. Order. The honourable member for Lévis-Lobinière. Madam Speaker, if I drive my car at 150 kilometers an hour in a school zone, I lose my driver's license and my car. A charitable donation does not minimize my crime and return my privileges to me. The Conflict of Interest Act requires that I declare my assets within 60 days of being appointed. The Minister of Finance still had not done that after 760 days. I feel for the Parliamentary Secretary who is stuck defending the indefensible. When will the Minister of Finance disclose what he has in his other numbered companies, and why is he untouchable? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Madam Speaker. We are not defending the indefensible. The Minister of Finance has always respected the laws and the rules and has acted according to the Ethics Commissioner's directives. This is a government that's done more for Canadians that need it most, which the Conservatives never managed to do in 10 years in power. They were so concentrated on giving tax breaks to the wealthiest and neglecting the middle class.
For Vancouver Kingsway.
Last week, the NDP